Hello and welcome. Today, we're diving into a nation that's just full of paradoxes. A country literally forged in volcanic fire, a place with almost no natural resources to its name, that somehow, against all odds, rose to become an absolute economic powerhouse. We're talking, of course, about Japan.
So that's the big question we're going to dig into, right? How did Japan manage to turn its biggest weaknesses into the very foundation of its success? And the answer? Well, it's this amazing story of geology, of incredible ingenuity, and just an unbreakable national spirit. All right, to really get a grip on this, we're going to break it down. So, here's the game plan. We'll start with the lay of the land itself, then we'll look at the enormous challenges that geography presents. From there, we'll see how Japan got creative to survive, how it built a global industrial machine, and finally, what the future might hold for this incredibly resilient nation. Okay, first things first. To get Japan, you've got to get its geography. It's not one big piece of land. It's a whole chain of islands, an archipelago, that stretches for thousands of kilometers. You've got everything from the cool north of Hokkaido, down through the massive main island of Honshu, past Shikoku and Kyushu, and all the way to the tropical Ryukyu Islands in the south. But, the real kicker isn't just the shape of these islands. It's how they got there and where they're sitting on the planet. And that leads us right into Japan's biggest, most constant challenge. Japan's very existence is it's this incredibly violent geological drama. It's a country that was literally built on the edge of disaster, forged in fire. So get this, the whole chain of islands is sitting right where three huge tectonic plates, the Pacific, the Philippine, and the Eurasian, are just constantly smashing and grinding into each other. Actually, Japan is basically just a string of volcanoes that popped up from these collisions. This constant, nonstop action is just part of daily life there. And what that means for the people living there is that risk is just a part of life. It's a given. Earthquakes? Yeah, they happen all the time. The landscape is dotted with active volcanoes on every major island except for Little Shikoku. And being an island nation sitting on these fault lines, the threat of a devastating tsunami is always there. And that brings us to the next massive problem. Because Japan is essentially a volcanic mountain range popping out of the sea, a whopping 80% of the country is just mountains. Steep, rugged mountains. So you have to ask, right? Where do you even live? And maybe more importantly, how in the world do you grow enough food for over 125 million people? Well, the short answer is you don't have much room at all. Just 20%, a tiny fraction of the land, is actually flat enough to build big cities or farm on, and most of that is packed onto the eastern coast. And this extreme lack of usable land, that has been the single biggest push for Japanese innovation for centuries. So let's see how they dealt with it. So you're faced with this seemingly impossible problem, right? Hardly any farmland. But Japan didn't just cope, they totally reinvented the whole game of agriculture. And this is where things get really clever. Japan basically pioneered indoor farming, or hydroponics. They literally started taking old abandoned factories, think old Sony plants, and transform them into these amazing high-tech vertical farms. Inside, they grow vegetables in layers, stacked high, with zero soil. Instead, they drip this perfectly formulated, nutrient-rich water right onto the roots. Then, automated LED lights give the plants the perfect dose of sunlight. And the result? It's incredible. They get higher yields and better quality produce than you could ever get from a traditional farm. Okay, so the land is tough, but the sea has been Japan's saving grace. A few things make it a fishing superpower. First off, you've got this amazing thing happening right off their coast, where the warm Kuroshio current from the south crashes into the cold Oyashio current from the north. And when they meet, it's like a 5-star buffet for fish, creating one of the richest fishing grounds on the entire planet. Add to that a jagged coastline perfect for natural harbors, a shallow continental shelf that's easy to fish, and waters where huge schools of one type of fish swim together, and you've got a recipe for success. Now, look, we can't really talk about Japan and the sea without getting into a really controversial topic. Whaling. It's been part of the culture for a long time, but modern whaling has put Japan in conflict with a lot of the world. This timeline here just lays out the key facts, no spin. So after the 1986 ban on commercial whaling, Japan came back in 2005 saying their program was for scientific research. Well, that led to a court case brought by Australia, and in 2014, the world's top court basically said, no, this isn't science, and ordered them to stop.
So we've seen how Japan tackled its food problem with tech and by mastering the sea. But that leaves another huge question. How did they build one of the world's most advanced industrial economies when they have basically no minerals, no coal, no oil of their own?
The answer is actually pretty simple. They import everything. I mean, Japan is the textbook case of an economy built on people, on human ingenuity, not on stuff you dig out of the ground. They became the world's #1 importer of coal and natural gas, and #2 for crude oil. They just became masters at turning those raw materials from other countries into high-tech, high-value goods to sell to the world.
And all this industry is squeezed into 4 main coastal areas, all built around huge ports to bring in all those raw materials. First up, and the biggest of them all, is the Kanto Plain. This is where Tokyo is. Think of it as the steel capital of Japan, with huge hubs in Yokohama and Kawasaki, turning out everything from electronics to cars.
All right, heading south from there, you hit the Nagoya Plain. Now, other cities there are known for things like textiles, but Nagoya, well, that is hands down the car capital of Japan, the absolute heart of their legendary auto industry. Then we've got the Kinki Plain, which is really the historic and cultural heart of the country. Here you've got Osaka, a big center for textiles, the old capital Kyoto, now a massive hub for tourism, and Kobe, a super important port city that specializes in petrochemicals and shipbuilding. And last but not least, you've got the Kyushu Plain way down in the south. This place is another industrial beast, with steel being the name of the game in Kito Kyushu and Nagasaki, while Hiroshima is a powerhouse for both cars and shipbuilding. These 4 areas are really the engine room of the whole Japanese economy.
Okay, so we've seen how Japan just masterfully dealt with the hand it was dealt geographically to become a global power. But what about the future? What are we looking at in terms of its core strengths and its biggest vulnerabilities?
You know, this slide really lays it all out. It's like a tale of 2 Japans. On the one side, their biggest asset is their people, a culture that is all about precision, perfection, and hard work. It's a world-class tech hub, it has great ports, and cheap power from its rivers. But on the flip side, that same population is now one of the oldest in the world. That means worker shortages and a huge economic strain from pensions. They're packed into tiny habitable areas, and of course that constant threat of earthquakes and tsunamis, it never ever goes away. You know, if you take away just one thing from all of this, it should be this idea right here. This deeply held belief that you can and must overcome restrictions. That's the engine that has driven everything we've talked about. No land? We'll invent new ways to farm. No resources? We'll become the best at manufacturing. This philosophy, it's the key. And that leaves us with one final massive question. The Japanese people proved, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that they could conquer the incredible challenges of their geography. But their biggest challenge now, in this century, isn't geology, it's demography. So, can that same unbelievable spirit of innovation and resilience solve the problem of an aging, shrinking population? That is the defining question for Japan's future.